When I began to contemplate what I would say to you this week, I originally thought I would pray, as I have before. However, in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police, I was angry. Angry that police officers who swear to protect and serve could be so violent and take human life so lightly. Angry that the bystanders who protested vociferously could not penetrate the cruelty of the man kneeling on George Floyd's neck. Angry that peaceful protesters are met by police in riot gear with tear gas and rubber bullets. Now, we Christians tend to minimize our anger, and indeed, human anger is often sinful. Yet, God is often angry. Depending on who's counting, God's anger is cited somewhere between 180 and 375 or more times in the Bible. It is usually directed at injustice. Jesus got angry. In John's Gospel, he makes a whip to drive the money changers and sellers of animals for sacrifice out of the temple. He didn't do this only because they were making a marketplace of the temple. He did it because they were cheating people who had brought animals to sacrifice and were told that they weren't good enough, that they would have to buy the animals for sale at the temple instead. And if they came a long distance and had brought their offering in the form of money, they had to exchange it for the coin of the temple, paying a hefty commission to the money changers. Jesus was angry not only because they conducted this business in the temple, but because they were taking advantage of those who came to worship. So he whipped them out of the temple and tore up their places of business. Today, we see people being similarly taken advantage of. But while in Jesus' day it was Jews taking advantage of fellow Jews, we have committed an even more egregious sin by deciding that some people deserve to be treated callously because of the color of their skin. In the United States, we seem to have perfected discrimination against people of color, be they African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, people of mixed race, immigrants, or anyone who doesn't look white enough. A few years ago, the phrase Black Lives Matter emerged. White people began to counter with all lives matter. Of course all lives matter. But sometimes some lives need more care. My mother used to say that if anyone asked her which of her 6 children she loved the most, she would answer, the one who's sickest until he gets well, the one who's farthest away till she comes home. The good shepherd was good to all his sheep. But when one of those sheep strayed, he left the rest of the flock alone to rescue the one that needed him most. As the body of Christ in this world, we must be on the side of those who need us. So many times we have seen protests over the killing of innocent women and men by police and other armed white men, and every time the protests eventually die down and everything goes back to normal. I hope and pray that this time, we don't go back to normal. I see hope in the fact that demonstrations are happening around the country and around the world, that protesters are dissuading would-be rioters and agitators from destruction and violence, and that more and more white people are involved in the protests and committed to change. I ask you to join me in committing to change. I admit that my days of marching in protest are over. The spirit is willing, but the knees are weak. But that doesn't mean I can do nothing. And together, we can do a great deal. Please ask God to show you where you can make a difference.